And I had put it in the back of the little car I drove around, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And so I presented this beautiful gift to my mother. And do you want to know what my mom did with that gift? She kept it for years and years. In fact, much to my chagrin, when I was much older, I found that shoebox in the closet with that frog still inside. Now you might be wondering, why did she keep the frog? Was she a little sick in the head? No. She kept the frog because she saw what it was from the limited understanding and resources of her 3-year-old son. A gift of love. 3-year-old Jeff couldn't buy her flowers or jewelry or take her out to a fancy dinner. So it didn't matter to her that it was a dead frog, because she knew that I had found something unique and special to me, as twisted as that might be. And in the mind of a 3-year-old explorer, I in turn showed my love for her by giving it to her. In today's readings, we hear about 2 widows and their generosity. And it's no mistake that both of the women in these readings are widows. In Jewish society, widows were the most vulnerable of all. They didn't inherit the property of their husbands when their husbands died. That went to the children. So widows were completely dependent on their children or families. And if they didn't have family, they might truly find themselves homeless and without a penny to their name. When today we speak of haves and have-nots in our society, women, or these widows, are the epitome of have-nots. And yet God uses each of these 2 widows to teach us a lesson about generosity. In Mosaic law, all the people of Israel over the age of 20 owed a temple tax. Even in the times when the land was occupied by outside forces that levied their own demands and taxes on the people, the temple tax remained obligatory. It was a modest annual flat tax that was charged to pay for the upkeep of the temple. But many people went into the temple treasury area and made great show of their generosity. The treasury, the trumpets that the coins were put into were made of metal, and so you could make quite the noise depending how you put your coins into it. Some went in doing the modern equivalent of making it rain, making quite the noisy display of their great generosity and how much money they had. While the widow's few pennies were a pittance in counting terms, Jesus saw them for what they were: a poor woman giving to God all that she had. For this, he credited her more than any of the other givers. And at every turn, he had implored his disciples, and in turn implores us, to give everything over to God. In fact, all that they have, all that we have, even their very lives, are a gift given to them from God in the first place. Last week, we heard the renewed call to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and our neighbor as ourself. God asks us not to give him the leftovers, but the first fruits, our very best, to give him our time, our service, our money, our talents, and most of all, our love. Before Mass, you heard a message from Helen with our Finance Council about the extreme crunch we're in as a parish. Over the summer, after consulting with the Finance Council, I shared with the parish the challenges we would face in the new budget year. The challenge is that we survived the pandemic shutdowns and its suppressed revenues by artificially controlling our own costs. And we could do that because the buildings were open a lot less and most of our activities were suspended. But as we resumed our full slate of parish activities this summer, We knew that our costs would go back up to their previous levels, and we knew that we were going to have to depend on our revenues or collections bouncing back in a like manner. But sadly, this has not happened to date. Some people in our parish have been extremely generous to help us in our critical need, and to them, I cannot express enough my gratitude. Nonetheless, we are still bleeding very badly. For those who do not follow the weekly financials in our bulletin, out of a $35,000 budgeted need for collections each week, we're averaging a $10,000 a week shortfall. And we're having to deplete our savings rapidly to keep things moving. Even in good times, our structures and overhead here consume a majority of our funds. Many people don't know that while the Archdiocese helped construct this beautiful cathedral, that we pay for its upkeep and use. I fear that if the major shortfall does not change in the weeks and months ahead, we may have to start considering major cuts. Not things on hidden costs or trimming the fat, that's been done, but cuts on the very things that people would rightly miss and grieve. And obviously, as a pastor, I do not want this to happen. Likewise, we've seen a drastic decrease in support for our outreach initiatives for the poor and less fortunate. So, as much as I do not enjoy it, I stand before you today to implore your help in raising the bar in our parish offertory giving. I realize that times have been difficult. Many households have been hit very hard during these last 2 years. Some have fared better. This appeal is not about judging who falls into which camp. God need be the only one to judge that. What I'm asking is that if you're not currently giving, please prayerfully consider what your family or household can give, whether in the baskets each week or electronically online. We push Faith Direct even more simply because it helps provide stability. The money in the basket's only as good as the person is there to give it. When there's swings in the virus or people go on vacation, our crowds here ebb and flow, and so do our cash collections. If you're giving already, thank you. And I ask that your family prayerfully consider whether you're in a place to increase your weekly offering. Money is not my favorite topic. My concern and vocation is to shepherd souls, something that cannot be bought or sold with money. And yet I know that our parish cannot exist without funds to not only pay our bills, but to fund the things that engage the mission of leading souls to Christ. Since I arrived at the Co-Cathedral 17 months ago, I've often heard people speak of us as a commuter parish. And it speaks to a reality that many of our people don't live in a surrounding neighborhood around the corner, but travel here from all over the Archdiocese because they want to come to the Cathedral Parish. While I acknowledge that distinction and try to adapt our approach as a parish accordingly, I also want to push back a little against what I fear could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. In many parts of the world, cathedrals aren't parishes. They're just simply buildings that are opened up a few times throughout the year for special masses with the bishop. We are not such a cathedral. We're a cathedral parish. A parish, under canon law, is defined as a certain community of the Christian faithful, stably constituted in a particular church, whose pastoral care is entrusted to a pastor under the authority of the diocesan bishop. Here's the key words I see in that definition: church, pastor, community, and one that is stable. Therefore, we cannot be just a place where people go to Mass and then go home, and that's the end of the story. A stable Christian community is so much more than that. I've shared in the past our parish paradigm: worship, belong, grow, give, and go. As a pastor, I have the responsibility to shepherd this community along those lines, to not only minister and worship and offer the sacraments, but to help the faithful to belong, to grow, to give, and to go forth. And if I fail in any of those tasks or in meeting those needs, I fail as a pastor. Likewise, a member of a parish has the responsibility to do all of those things, to worship, to belong to the community and to Christ, to grow in faith and discipleship, to give back, and to go forth and transform the world. If a parish member does not do those things, they cannot call themselves a disciple of Christ and a member of a community. Now, I believe in this parish and its people. When Cardinal DiNardo assigned me here to be your pastor, I was excited because I recognized the Co-Cathedral as a beating heart in the center of Houston, and it's a privilege to get to be a part of this community. We can be a shining light of Catholic faith in Houston. And this is a great gift and a great responsibility. Therefore, I ask each of us to examine ourselves today. How are we doing as Christian disciples? I'll intentionally ask these questions, which are addressed to all of us, myself included, in the second person. Are you giving God all of your love and your worship? Are you living as part of the body of Christ, as the church, as a community, or are you just going at it alone? What are you doing to grow, to feed your faith and understanding? How are you giving back from what you received? And what are you doing to take the gospel out into the world? Today, I do not hide the fact that I'm making an ask for money. The parish needs it if it's to survive as we know it. But I'm also challenging, in the light of the gospel, for all of us to re-examine our generosity of stewardship as a whole, of our time, our talent, our treasure, and indeed our whole livelihood. Do we merely give from our surplus, our extra, or do we give liberally from an undivided heart? I implore you today to be generous to God. The Lord will not be outdone in generosity. Each moment in which we give, in which we live radically for Him, He sees to our needs and takes our lowly offerings and does amazing things with them. Even the offerings which seem so meek and lowly to us, our lowly gifts and talents, our broken and vulnerable hearts, 2 meager pennies like the poor widow, or even a smashed frog in a shoebox.